Hi, this is Tom. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how to outperform your natural talent. And everyone's kind of given a natural talent for different things. So some things you might be really talented in, really good at, and other things you might struggle and feel like you're not so good at those things. And you may have this feeling that you'll never be good at them. The purpose of this video is to kind of argue the point that regardless of your baseline talent or your natural talent, you can overcome that and achieve amazing results, amazing outcomes, develop amazing skills, even in things that you don't think you're naturally talented at. And there's some things that you can implement to make sure you do as well as you possibly can in the things that matter to you. So first, let's talk about comparing talent with hard work and deliberate effort towards developing skills in a certain area. So I would argue that the baseline is less important over time. So for example, let's take two people who have a different level of talent in a skill. So for example, this could be somebody who's really good at maths and someone else who thinks they're really bad at maths. And the person who's super talented at maths starts out being really good. So for example, when they start primary school and they get given simple maths problems, say they're 5 years old or 6 years old, they find those problems easy to solve. Then you have somebody who's supposedly really bad at maths, and at 5 or 6 years old, they get given simple maths problems and they really struggle. The numbers just don't make sense to them and they struggle with it. So this person who's super talented starts with a higher baseline. So if you take a graph of skill and age, and skill on the y-axis, age on the x-axis, you would plot that super talented person higher up at a younger age. Then you've got the person who's supposedly bad at maths. They start lower down at a younger age. But let's say that super talented person never puts in the work and the consistency and the deliberate practice to develop that math skill. Over time, their talent might go up throughout, say, primary school and secondary school as they have compulsory maths lessons. They do develop some math skills. But once they finish school, if they don't keep working on that, their talent will go down and they'll gradually get worse and worse. Now you take somebody who's not so good as a baseline in terms of maths, but let's say they really enjoy it, they really study hard, they really want to do well in maths, and they push themselves and stay consistent over time. Their development has the potential to really accelerate past the person who's naturally talented. And by the end of school, they may be way better than the person who's naturally talented. Then, as time goes on and they get older and older, but they keep practicing maths, they'll get even more, there'll be even more of a difference between them and the naturally talented person. So, for example, at age 5, talent probably beats work and deliberate practice. But then at age 15, the natural talent and the work may be about the same. So the person who's naturally talented may have about the same skill level as the person who puts in lots of work but isn't naturally talented. But then by age 25, the person who's working hard and deliberately practicing will be way better than the person who's naturally talented. And this gets even more obvious as time goes on. So by the time you get to age 50, in any given field, the people who are the best are the person who is the hardest working and the most determined is going to beat the person who's talented but doesn't put in the work every time by age 50, probably by age 30 or 40. So over time, as you get older, hard work beats talent every time. So let's look at some key things that we can do to accelerate our learning, accelerate our ability, and make sure we're making the most of what's given to us and outperforming our natural talent. Number one is to increase the number of feedback cycles. What does this mean? Well, a feedback cycle essentially says you take an action and then you assess the result. So you take an action, let's say you try and solve a maths problem, or you try climbing a climbing wall, or you shoot a basketball, or you attempt singing a song, or any skill you attempt and you put in some kind of action towards that skill that you're trying to develop. Then you get a result. So let's say you're shooting a basketball, you either get the basketball in or you miss, slightly to the left, slightly to the right. And then after you have the result, you reflect on that result. So was my action, what was it about my action that resulted in a good thing or a negative thing, and what should I change for the future? This reflection leads to learning, and you apply that learning to the next action. And this is a feedback cycle. Each time you do one of these feedback cycles, you learn something and you get better at the skill. If you don't do any feedback cycles, you don't get any better. So it really comes down to how many feedback cycles can you pack in to your learning. If you can do 100 feedback cycles in a day and sustain that for a year or two, you're going to have an incredible amount of learning. If you don't do any feedback cycles, you're going to have zero learning. So the more feedback cycles you can pack in, the more you're going to develop and accelerate your learning and accelerate your results. A good example of this was when I first started this YouTube channel, or when I started doing these videos earlier this year. My aim was to get better at talking to the camera, to get better at presenting things, to get better at sharing ideas, and to learn what people wanted on YouTube. And my goal was to do one video every day. That meant I got a really strong feedback cycle every single day in terms of all the skills needed to create the video and the feedback from the audience on what they liked, what they didn't like. And by doing one video every day, I got 7 massive feedback cycles every week, and my skill set really accelerated. Suppose I'd done one video every week as opposed to one video every day, it would have taken me 7 weeks to get the same amount of feedback cycles as I did in 1 week doing it that way. So the more feedback cycles you can get in, the faster you'll learn, the faster you'll develop, and the faster you'll outperform your natural talent. Second thing you can do is something called deliberate practice. So this is probably more important, or this is more important doing deliberate practice than just doing lots of practice. So what does this mean? This means when you practice a skill, when you're trying to get better at something, you're intentionally pushing the limits of what you can do. So you can think of this in terms of 3 zones. The inner zone is kind of your comfort zone with this skill. So let's say you're learning to play the guitar. Your comfort zone is playing the same song that you already know how to play, the same chords, playing them over and over again. And if you spend an hour just playing the same song that you already know, you're not developing your skill, you're not doing deliberate practice. You're not making any progress. This is the comfort zone. Outside the comfort zone is a kind of discomfort zone. And this is where you're pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone. So you're learning new things, you're kind of pushing yourself a bit further than you've pushed before, and you're trying to reach into new areas of your skills. This is uncomfortable. This doesn't feel natural. It can feel like you're wading through mud. You'll make lots of mistakes. You won't feel kind of comfortable and easy. This is where you're learning the most stuff. And then outside of that is the danger zone, where you're kind of either risking something. Let's say you're doing a skill that has an element of danger For example, let's say you're doing climbing, which is something I'm really into at the minute. This is where you could be doing something that risks injury and so on. Or you're just not going to learn anything because you'll be so bad at the skill that, there's no room for learning. So the danger zone is, it's not necessary to go that far, but you want to go into the discomfort zone where you're pushing yourself and learning. This is where you want to spend as much time. Deliberate practice means quality over quantity. So people traditionally talk about this 10,000 hours of practice makes you an expert. This is not necessarily true. If you do 10,000 hours in the comfort zone practicing the same stuff you can already do over and over again, you're not really going to make much progress. But if you're doing quality practice where you're intentionally going to the discomfort zone, addressing your weaknesses, and pushing things a little bit further, doing new problems each time, this is where you're getting the most quality. And it's not going to take you 10,000 hours to become an expert. It'll be much quicker. If you spend 10,000 hours in the comfort zone, you're not going to become an expert because you're just doing the same thing over and over again. The other part of deliberate practice is to break things down into component parts. So if you have to solve a problem, which is currently a bit out of your range of skills, you can break that problem down into individual parts and practice the individual parts of that. So for example, let's say you're learning to sing a particular song and you can sing 80% of the song, but there's some notes in the song that you just can't hit and you keep making a mistake on those particular areas. You could practice just that very specific section of the song over and over again. And this is by practicing that very specific section, then when you put it all together, it makes much more sense. It comes together all as one. So another example of this is with climbing. Let's say I'm climbing a route on a climbing wall, and there's one section of the route that is causing problems, and it's because there's one type of movement I'm not very good at. I could then go away and practice that specific movement, that specific issue over and over again until I become really good at it. Then when I come back to that problem, it's much easier to do the whole thing. There's no point practicing the easy bits all the time. You want to focus on the weakest areas, focus on the weakest link of your practice and address that, and then the whole thing will get better. Which kind of, that's another important point, which is find the weakest area in the skill that you're trying to get better at and address that weak area. That will then unlock lots of further growth in things that, So if you're just focusing on repeatedly practicing the easy stuff that you're already good at, but there's this big weak area that you're not addressing, you're not going to make progress. It's really by addressing the weaknesses that you make overall progress. Third point is to get expert guidance. Having somebody who's much better than you and really knows the skill you're trying to develop, guide you, can really accelerate how fast you progress. If you're trying to do things on your own, you're going to have blind spots, areas that you can't figure out on your own. And with expert guidance, you'll be able to accelerate much faster. If you surround yourself with people who are better than you at that skill, that will elevate your skill set much faster. So for example, with climbing, there's been times where I've been really struggling with a climb and I just can't figure out how to do it. And I'm trying over and over again. I'm doing all the things that I know how to do, really trying to get this climb. And then I've climbed with somebody who's much better than me. And they've said, oh, well, if you shift your weight like this and use this hold like that, that should unlock it for you. Then I've tried it and I've done the climb that I've been trying for, say, weeks. I've managed to do it on that attempt because of their guidance. So use people who are better than you to elevate your own skill set. This could be teachers, this could be hiring a specific coach, could be peers who are just a bit further ahead than you and can teach you. Could be learning from books or podcasts or videos, but just absorbing from people who are further along and better than you at that skill can really speed things up. Number 4 is to track your progress. So by writing down and tracking your progress over time, this will really help to, number 1, keep you consistent. Secondly, keep you on track with your specific goals, highlight the areas you need to work on, and really just show your progress. So what I would suggest tracking is key metrics. So let's say you're trying to develop any kind of skill, whether that's solving maths problems, answering medical exam problems, getting better at the guitar, getting better at climbing, any kind of sport, like, it could be golf or any kind of sport that you're trying to do. Track the key metrics that you want to get better at. And I suggest creating a tracking table where you look at those key metrics over time. So say every week you track how you're doing with those key metrics. Figure out what the specific thing that will show how you're improving over time, what those specific things are, and track those. So for example, if you're trying to get stronger, you would track how heavy the weights are in certain lifts. So how much can you bench press? How much can you squat? How much can you deadlift? If you're trying to get better at, say, multiple choice question exams for medicine, you would do exams, do practice exams, and track your scores on those practice exams over time for specific areas. And you can apply this to almost anything, but I can't go through all the skills you could be trying to learn. You've got to figure out for your skill, what is the metric you want to track and what do you want to improve to demonstrate that you're getting better at that skill. Second thing to track is your practice sessions. So how much deliberate practice are you putting in place to get better at that skill? And the final thing is consistency. I can't stress how much consistency beats short-term intensity. So cramming or doing like an intense day or two or week of practice on a thing will only get you so far, but consistency over time always wins. So let's take a graph where you've got skill or outcomes or results on the y-axis and time on the left axis. And you've got somebody who's a bit more talented and they go through periods where they're more intensely working on something, but then they kind of drop off for a few months, then they do an intense week, drop off for a few months. And you'll see that their results and their skill level kind of goes up and then comes down, goes up, comes down, and they never really get better over time. This is the person with a lack of consistency. Another person may have a lower baseline talent, but they stay consistent and keep working on something, making gradual progress consistently over time. And in the end, this consistent person ends up with more skill and does better. So consistency beats short-term intensity, it beats talent. Consistency involves overcoming failures and keeping going despite obstacles. And your consistency will maintain your results. So this is another really important thing, particularly for anyone everybody's getting older, but people who are, over 25, consistency is essential to maintain your results over time. Without consistency, naturally, your skill level and your outcomes will start to degrade. So let's say you get in really good shape, you're in the best shape of your life, you're incredibly strong and fit and healthy at 25, but then you just stop exercising, you stop eating well. Very quickly, your results will drop off And then particularly as you get over, say, 35, 40, your fitness will massively decline if you're not consistent and you don't keep exercising and eating well. However, if you're consistent, you'll retain those results well into your older age. And this is true of any skill. If you're not practicing it, if you're not staying consistent, it will degrade over time and you will lose that ability that you once had. So staying consistent is how you retain the results. I hope that video was helpful. Let me know what you think of this new format where the image kind of writes itself as opposed to me handwriting things as we go along. And sorry about the very long delay. I've been really busy trying to sort out lots of things. But I'm hoping to get more consistent now with weekly videos. And I'll see you in the next video, which will be hopefully in around a week's time. Okay, bye now.